Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel Among in Cloud. In this video, we are going to build a serverless file sharing platform. So what I've done is everything that I'm going to demonstrate today is documented in my GitHub repository. You can find that link in the description box below. So now let's dive into the project and understand what is this file sharing platform and what is the use case of this. Okay. Firstly, the serverless file sharing platform, it allows users to securely upload and download files via HTTP API. So it leverages AWS Lambda for serverless compute, and it is also going to use API gateway for RESTful API management and S3 for durable and secureable object storage. So users can interact with this platform using HTTP clients like Postman, making it versatile for various use cases that involve file sharing and storage. Now you might ask me, what are the use cases of this? File sharing can be used by users to upload files to the platform using post request, specifying the file name and the content. So this can be useful for sharing documents, images, or any other digital assets securely. Second one is file distribution, where content creators can distribute files, for example, software updates, media updates. All these things can be provided to the consumers by generating download links through the platform. Okay. Next is collaborative work. For example, if you are collaborating with a team of 20 people, so these teams can share project resources, documents, and data securely, facilitating collaboration across different locations. So the project architecture looks like this. So I am going to use Postman as my client today. And we are also going to use API gateway, which is the bridge between your Lambda function and your actual source. Okay. Next, we have a Lambda function called upload function. Basically, when a user hits the Lambda function by going via the API gateway, he is interacting with the S3 bucket in the background. Okay. For example, if I want to upload a file called text, okay, a user will upload a file called text that will hit the API gateway, and this API gateway will send that request, or it will be invoked by the Lambda function, and this Lambda function, we call that as the upload function. This will trigger an alert inside the AWS network, and that will allow the whatever the user is sending, the text file will be uploaded to your S3 bucket. Okay. And again, let's say if the user wants the data that is stored in the S3 bucket, so there is another API called download function. Here we are going to use the get call. Here it is a post request. Post means you are uploading the file. Get means you are actually requesting the content of the file. So in that scenario, again the user will request the API gateway, and API gateway will send that request to the Lambda function, and that Lambda function will in turn speak to your S3 bucket and get the content of that file back to the Lambda function, and Lambda function sends it to the API gateway, and then it will be sent to the client. Okay. So this is what we are trying to build. Now, if you ask me whether it is secure or not, as this is just a simple use case where we are not going to implement any security. For example, when I say security, if you are interacting with real world APIs like AWS provided APIs and all, you will have to authenticate to your AWS account. So here we are not doing that. We are just making it very simple. So you can actually build on this idea. So actually, I think I have documented the future scope in the same document. So you can enhance this project and try to utilize this as a base for your project. Okay. So with that being said, what I have done is I've also documented all the steps that are required, including the name and everything. So you can just follow along by this document and you can complete the project. Once you complete the project, please let us know by tagging us on LinkedIn or any other social media platforms. You can find us at @Among in Cloud. And now, without wasting much time, let's get into the AWS console and start building this project. See you there. Okay, here are the steps to build this project. So what we have is we have around 8 steps to complete this. So what we are going to do is let's go ahead and start building this. First, let's go ahead and complete the step one, that is to create an S3 bucket to store the uploaded files. For example, a user is uploading the file and that should sit in an S3 bucket, and the name of the S3 bucket I'm going to use is my file sharing bucket AMC. Okay, let me copy this. Please make sure that you are using your own name, so that it will, right? So the S3 bucket name should be different across the globe. So let's make use of that. Okay, I'll just click on create bucket, and it is going to be for general purpose. I'll paste the name that I copied, my file sharing bucket AMC, and rest of the things I will keep that as default, and I come all the way down and click on create bucket. So this is going to create a bucket for me. Now let's go ahead and complete the second step. The second step is to create the Lambda function to handle file uploads. For example, when I told you, when a user uploads a file, so that should go ahead, invoke a Lambda function, and that's going to be your upload function. I'm going to use the runtime as Python 3.x, and we need an execution role for the Lambda function to work. So the Lambda function here, if you see, this is interacting with the S3 bucket, API gateway, right? So this function needs a permission to work with S3 and API gateway. So what we need to do, we need to create a role with the policy that I've given. Okay, so if you do not have the policy, what you can do is come all the way up where you can see all the things. You go to impolicy.json here. This is the policy that is actually required for you to work with this project. If you want, in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a role which has got admin privileges. But in real life, you should not use admin privileges. So you should use fine-grained access. For that, you need to use this policy. Okay. So let me make that clear to you in the very beginning, so that there is no confusion in the further. So now let's go ahead, copy the name of the function, and I'll go to my AWS console and I'll search for Lambda. Okay, I'll click and open that in the new tab. There are no functions now. Let's go ahead and click on create function. We are going to author from the scratch. I'm going to select and give the name as upload function. The runtime I'm going to choose is 3.9. Rest of the things I'll keep that as default, but we need to change the default execution role. I'll select that and I'll use an existing role. There is a role called SFTP in my account. So I'll show you what is the permission that it has. So I'm going to use this role. But the permission side, I've given complete access, that is the administrator access, but it should not be the case. So as I told you, you should use that IAM.json file to update your things. Okay. There should also be trust relationships to the Lambda function, and the Lambda function should be able to assume this role. Okay. With that being clear, so let's go ahead and click on create function. So this is going to create your Lambda function. Next, we need to create another function which is to download the file. For example, as I told you, if a user wants to retrieve a file that is there in the S3 bucket, he needs to use a Lambda function called download function. Although he is not using it directly, there should be a Lambda function called download function. So what we'll do, we'll get the download function. I'll go to the Lambda function again. Here, I'll click on create functions again. We are going to author from scratch. I'll paste the name. Again, we are going to use Python 3.9. Again, we need to change the role to the same role. I'll select that and I'll click on create function. So this completes the third step that we have in the code. Now, what we need to do is we need to create an API gateway. So this API gateway is the bridge between your Lambda function and the S3 bucket. So the name of the API gateway is my file sharing API AMC. And we need two resources for it. One is /files with the post call and the get methods. Okay. So for each method, so we need to configure the Lambda integration with the upload function and also the download function respectively. So what I'll do, I'll copy the name of the API gateway. I'll go to my AWS console, search for API, and you will get API gateway. Let's open that in the new tab. Let's go and select REST API. I'll click on build and I'll select new API. I'll give the name as my file sharing API AMC. I'll click on create API. As I told you, we need to create two resources, one /files with post and get methods. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. Let's click on create resource. Here in the path, we need to provide the path here actually. So I'll give that as files. Okay, so I'll remove slash here because we already have slash here. Okay, I'll enable this chorus and I'll just click on create resource. Okay, so we have the resource created now. Let's go ahead and create another resource. But before that, we need to, for this resource that we created, we need to create the post and get methods. So what we'll do, let's go to the API gateway. Let's close all this one. Let's click on create method. So first we need to select the Lambda function itself. So it is going to be post request first. As I told you, it's going to be post and get. First let's go with the post, and we need to select for post it is going to be upload function, and for get it is going to be download function. So let's do that. I'll select post, I'll select Lambda function. Here I need to choose the right Lambda function. For post it is going to be upload function. I'll select that and I'll come all the way down and I'll click on create method. So this will create a method for us. Let's wait for that to complete. Okay, now that is complete. So what I'll do, I'll click on files again. We'll need another method to be created. Let's click on create method and it is going to be get, and let's select the same Lambda function, but this time it is going to be download function. Let's keep everything else as default and click on create method. So what we have done is we have created the API gateway and we created two methods, one with the post and the other one with the get. Okay, now let's go ahead first understand the code required for the Lambda functions. So that is very important. So what I'll do first, I'll make you understand about the upload function. So what I've done is I've given the code here itself so that it will be easy for you. If you see here, this is a simple Python script that I've written. I'm going to import JSON and Boto3 in the very first lines, okay? And later I'm interacting with S3 bucket, so I'm using Boto3.client S3, that is going to be our S3 client. And as you know, Boto3 is the client or the SDK that we are interacting with AWS. So if you do not know what is Boto3, I have a separate playlist for that and I've got a huge response for that. Make sure to check that out. Okay, later what I'm doing is I'm defining the Lambda handler. So here it will we have some try except block. What we do is firstly we are going to get the file content, okay, and we are getting the file name as well. So we are using event body as a file content, and we are getting the event query string parameters as the file name itself. Okay, so once we get that details, we use a method called s3.put object, and where we get the bucket name and the key file name. Key file name will be this one, file underscore name, and the body will be the content of the event that we are sending. Okay, so if that succeeds, we are going to return status 200. If that fails, we are going to return 500. Okay, so this is about the upload function. So what we'll do is we'll copy this one. Let's go to Lambda function and we'll go ahead and select the upload function. And here I'll click on lambda.py. I'll clear all of this content. Let me paste what I copied. Control S and let's click on deploy. So we have uploaded the upload function now. Let's go ahead and continue with the second one, that is download function. So let's open the download function and understand the code first, and then we will make the changes in the Lambda function. Here also the concept remains the same. I'm going to use JSON, Boto3 and base64 because I'm going to encrypt, encrypt is not the right word. I'm going to encode it with a base64. Here again, I'm going to get the bucket name. This is the bucket name that we are interacting. So make sure to change this accordingly even in the file upload function and also in the download function. Here again, I'm using the Lambda handler. I'm fetching the file name by the event query string parameter. And then I'm getting the file object. So I use this method called s3.get object and the bucket name and the key name of the file. So I'm getting that from the file underscore name. Later, I need to use a variable called file underscore content, and that variable is going to get the data from the file that we already have in the S3 bucket. So if that works, I'm going to return that as a status 200, and I'm going to encrypt or encode that data. Sorry, encrypt is not the right word. Encode that data and send it to the user. If it fails, I'm going to raise an exception called 500. Okay, so with that, if that is clear to you, let's copy this code and I'll go to the Lambda function. Let's go to download function. Let's go to lambda function.py and remove all the existing content and paste the code that we copied. Control S and deploy. So we have completed almost 75% of the project. Now what we need to do is, let's go back to our GitHub repository. So far we have completed step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, that is to create an API gateway. Now what we need to do is we need to configure the get method. So what we need to do is, as I told you, we are sending the query string parameters in the client itself. So we need to make the necessary changes in the API. Where we need to do that changes, for get method we need to, so first go to method request, we need to edit, and we need to select the request validator as a query validate query string parameters and headers. That is because we are sending the query string parameters in the API itself. So let's do that. Let's go to method get. Let's open get first, and let's go to method request. Let's edit it. Here what we need to do, in the request validator, we need to select the validate query string parameters and heading. Okay, so if that is clear to you, let's see if there is any modification that needs to be done. Again, we have another method request edit, and here in the request body it should be text or plain. So let me copy that also. So here if you see request body is there, let's select that. So I think I'm in the right page. Yeah, request body. Here I need to add a model, and that is going to be your text or plain. Let's save this. Okay, so this is for the get request. And we also need to do one more change, that is to in the integration request we need to map the template with the content that we have here, because we are looking for we are sending the query string parameters, right? So that will be your file name. So we need to copy this and paste there. Okay, let's go and copy this. Let's go to the same method, integration request. Let's edit it. Here if you scroll all the way down, there is something called as mapping templates. Let's click on add it, and here we need to paste the content that we just copied, and make sure it is application/json only, and let's go ahead and save it. Okay, so I think we need to type that. Instead of typing, what I'll do is I'll just copy what I have in the GitHub repository, place it, and just scroll down and save it. Okay, so this is done for the get request. Get request has a lot of modification, but post method will have a minimum modification. That is, we need to just edit the integration request, and there we need to modify the mapping template, and the content type would be, here it will be text or plain, and the body of the content is this. So let's go to API gateway, select post request, scroll all the way down, and here select integration request, click on edit, scroll all the way down, let's go to mapping request, let's click on add, and here I'll provide the content type as text or plain, and I need to provide the value. Let's copy this, and I'll scroll down and I'll paste it here. So here also we are doing the same thing, but we are getting the query string parameters, and that is your file name. Let's scroll down, let's click on save. Now with that being said, we have completed the configuration changes that needs to happen on the API gateway. The only step that is remaining is to deploy the API itself. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and deploy the API, and we will test this one. Okay, so to do that, let's go to API gateway. Let's click on deploy API. So we will select a new stage here. Let's name that stage as dev, and let's click on deploy. So this is all you have to do for the completion of project. If you see here, you have the invoke URL. You just need that URL to work with this Lambda function, sorry, the API gateway. So the next one would be testing. So we'll test it by uploading a file, and we'll also see how to download a file. All right. So to test this project, there are different ways of doing it. One is to use tools like Postman. So for example, if you see here, this is how this is how the UI of the Postman looks. You just need to enter all the details here and select the appropriate request and send it. But I'm not a huge fan of using tools like this. What you can do is you can get the corresponding curl command or the Python request here. So Postman is really good in providing the conversions or the code snippet. So I use this regularly. So if I'm using the get request here for this endpoint, if I ask me to provide the curl command, it will do the right. So what I'll do is what I've done is I have created the API gateway here. We have the invoke URL. We need to use this invoke URL to get the curl command and then test it on my terminal. If you want, you can use the same tool, but as I told you, I'm not a huge fan of this. So what I'll do, I'll go to my repository here. Under testing, you have the curl utility. So what you need to do is you just need to replace with your endpoint URL from the API gateway. If you go to API gateway, you have the invoke URL, and you need to use this invoke URL instead of what you have it in the repository. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just copy this one. So here we are basically sending the content type as text as plain, and the data that I'm sending is hello world from a Monk in Cloud. So this is the data that I'm storing it in that file called test.txt. Okay, now I'll copy this one. I'll go to my terminal. I'll paste it. As I told you, I need to change this URL here. Let me remove quickly. All right. So what is the invoke URL that we have? Let me copy this. I'll go to my terminal, paste the same, and I'll hit enter. So if you see, it says message missing authentication token. So what we can do instead of this is, let's go to Postman. Let's go to post request. I think let's remove this and copy what the content that we have in the repository. Okay, so we need to use this at the end. Let's copy that. Let me go to Postman, paste this one here. That will be setting as a parameters here, authorization. I'll select no auth because we are not interested in authorizing anything right now. Let's select raw, and in the text I need to select this, and I'm using this one. So I get the corresponding curl command. Let me copy this. I'll go here. Let me clear the screen for you. I'll paste this. If you see, this is what we have right now. Let me hit enter, and you will see the status code displaying 200 in the body saying file uploaded successfully. So what we'll do, let's go to the S3 console, and if you see here, there are 0 objects. Let me refresh it. If you see, a file called test.txt is uploaded. Okay, so if you want to verify, let's go and open this one. Let's go and open. It will download the file. In fact, let me open it. You see, you get the whatever we uploaded, hello world from a Monk in Cloud. Okay, now let's do one more thing. Instead of that, right, we have also built the download API. So let's invoke that and see what happens. To do that, we will use the same, but let's go to Postman again. Instead of post, let's select get request, and here the body will be none for the get request, and the parameters will remain the same. Authorization will no auth, and let's copy this curl. Let me go to my terminal. Let me paste this simple curl command, and I'll hit enter. If you see here, we are getting a JSON body. We are getting a JSON body which says the status code is 200, body is this one, and is base 64 encoded. It says true. The body that we have here, this is the actual content of that file, but it is base 64 encoded. So what we can do is, let's copy this content. Let's go to online and search for base 64. So this, you will get a interface like this. Let's paste this. Okay, so once you paste this, let's click on decode and see what is there. If you see, we are getting hello world from a Monk in Cloud, But if you want to alter this, instead of encoding it with base64, you can straight away get the content also. That is another thing that you can do. But for Postman, right, on a first in your first trial itself, it might not work because there are some configuration that you need to perform. But I rather use this tool to get the corresponding curl request and then use it on my Mac terminal. So this is what I wanted to show in this video. So I hope I made it clear to you. So this is a very simple project for you to understand how things work in the backend. But you can go ahead and add authorization to it. If you want to improve this project a bit, you can do that. Feel free to use this repository or however you want. If there are any issues, please report it so that we can also correct. Okay, so that's all I had for this video. I hope you enjoyed learning along with me. If you're liking the content that I'm creating, please consider subscribing and share it with your friends. Thank you, and I will see you in the next one. Hey, wait, but before going to the next project, please make sure to delete all the resources that you created. Thank you.